Good morning, Dr. Says here. I'm excited to do this educational session today because foot rot is so common and there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation around prevention and especially the role of foot trimming. Please jump over to the YouTube channel to support me by subscribing, comment, ask your questions so I can see them and reply there, and I will see you in a sec. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Says the Vet. I am Says. We're briefly going to cover today what it is and how to recognise foot rot, but I really want to focus on treatment and prevention because it's not safe to rely on antibiotic treatment constantly, and if you've got it in your soil, it will be a recurrent issue. So foot rot is without a doubt the most common cause of lameness I see working in the warm north of New Zealand. Foot rot is a bacterial infection in the feet of cloven-hoofed animals, sheep, goats, cattle. Actually alpaca can carry it as well. We're going to focus on sheep and goats. In cattle, they tend to appear lame when it's a lot more severe. Sheep and goats will be obvious a lot earlier on, even just with what you would normally think of as a mild scald can be really painful for these guys. It starts with inflammation in between the toes and progresses to separation of the hoof wall and pitting of the sole of the foot as the bacteria underrun the living tissue. It has a distinctively foul odour of rotting flesh, hence the name, and if you cut away that separated horn, often you're going to find grey rotting tissue underneath, sometimes pus. You're running sheep and goats together, you may well find yourself thinking at times that the goats seem more predisposed. It's likely that they're both carrying the same bacteria, but it presents more severely in goats. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump straight into treatment and prevention. The first key principle to understand here is that foot rot is a whole flock problem. Even those that are not lame yet will probably still be infected and at least carrying the bacteria around, spreading it. It's in the mud, it's in the field, so the whole system needs to be looked at. So first point of contact is foot trimming, yay or nay. There's a lot of controversial information out there and a lot of people disagreeing with each other. When you have an outbreak, every foot of every animal needs to be examined. You may need to trim away any overgrown hoof to actually just identify the infection, keeping in mind that the bacteria actually encourage fast hoof growth. So you will have more overgrown feet if they are infected. And of course you want to achieve a proper hoof shape when you're trimming, but also to be exposing those nasty bacteria to the air. So in theory, given these ideas, absolutely trimming is going to be helpful. However, and this is where the controversy comes in, it has actually been shown that excessive hoof trimming slows down the healing of foot rot, and there's some good research showing that. And this is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you cut back that hoof to the extent where you hit sensitive tissue and get blood, you've given yet another route for fresh infection to actually track up in the bloodstream. Secondly, trimming of the hoof wall means the animal is now standing on that really painful sole of the foot, which leads to bruising of the sole and further infection. So if you're going to trim, just remember the hoof wall grows at 3 millimeters a month, really slowly. So overgrown horn, absolutely get that away. Try and get it back to a normal weight bearing surface if you can, but be conservative. Otherwise you may well be doing more bad than good. Personally, when I see a severe case, I go the route of trimming very conservatively, if at all, and then I come back when the infection's healed to really clean the thing up. These trimmings are also going to be infectious, and I'm going to come back to that. Right, so we have, number one, checking every foot of every animal and trimming away the hoof appropriately, if at all. Remembering that those trimmings are going to be infectious, so dispose of them. Also, your clippers are going to be infectious, so make sure they're disinfected regularly, ideally between animals, at the very least between mobs. Secondly, we want to be checking feet every 3 weeks, but if anything new crops up, if any new animals become lame, they need immediate treatment to get on top of it. Thirdly, antibiotics. Now, whether you have a mild case of scald or a severe case of foot rot, the fix is going to be antibiotics. Go ahead and get your vet. You'll need to have this diagnosed, check everyone again in 21 days and retreat with those antibiotics if necessary. A long-acting pain relief such as meloxicam is an absolute must as well, just for welfare. Sometimes they're so painful, they're lame as if their leg is broken, so it's incredibly painful. Imagine having an infection under your fingernail and now someone's forcing you to walk on that fingernail. So they do need pain relief. Please go ahead and give it. Now, turning to a more flock-based approach. You can breed for resistant genes. There is evidence that this is susceptibility to foot rot is heritable, so it can be argued, and it is argued really, that we should be culling repeat offenders to control it in the flock. If you're happy to go down that route, most of the clients that I work with, these are pet animals, so that's not something to even bring up in discussion, but at the very least I would be saying don't breed from these animals. Now this bacteria lives in the mud, so I always recommend to lay lime in muddy areas. That's another thing that you can target. Find your muddy areas, lay your lime. This is often around gateways, water troughs, paths, and this just alters the pH so the bacteria can't survive there. It also helps to keep the feet up out of the wet. Now be aware, as we said earlier, that these trimmings are infectious, so dispose of them if you can and prevent yarding the flock for long periods of time somewhere where you've been trimming. Ideally, standing them in a fresh zinc sulfate foot bath on the way out is also ideal. You're going to trim if necessary, clean the feet, soak in your foot bath, treat with your antibiotics, whether that's a spray or an injectable, let the feet dry and then go ahead and let them back out into the paddock. We don't want to be spraying with an antibiotic spray, for example, and turning them straight out into the mud. That's just counterproductive. If you can lay concrete in your handling areas so they've got a hard surface that you can disinfect as well, that is best case scenario. Now this one's my favourite, spelling of your paddocks. So this just means resting your paddocks. Sure, the bacteria live in the dirt, but they're not invincible. In fact, if you can rest your paddocks, as in have no hooved animals in there that can keep spreading it around, for 4 weeks, you're going to drastically decrease the amount of that mild species of bacteria in the field. And lastly, and I get asked a lot about this, vaccination is an option. Now you have to understand, however, that there are multiple different strains of the bacteria and it's never going to be a flawless vaccine. We're using it to help reduce the incidence in the group and the severity of the disease when it does crop up, but it's not a miracle cure straight across the board. We do have good success in sheep. Goats are a little more variable with their response, unfortunately, so it's a bit of giving it a go and see how it works on your property. The vaccine's given twice, so the first and then a booster 4 to 8 weeks later, and then you need to give your 6 monthly boosters from there, ideally just prior to the high risk season. So in New Zealand, this is our warm and wet spring and autumn. Unfortunately, up in our north of Auckland, where it's very warm and wet, sometimes it even seems like it's almost year round. Okay, so a lot of info for you there. I'm gonna tone it back now and leave that to all soak in. Don't forget to jump over to the YouTube channel to subscribe, please. And if you have any requests for further detail or clarification, how to foot trim, for example, how to foot bath, please comment over there on YouTube so I can see it. Okay, rock on guys, and I will see you at the next episode. See you later.